Hello again, everybody. It's Takedown. Scott Casper with you. It was August 23rd in a fight with Michael Bisping in Macau, China, where Kung Lee tested positive for elevated levels of human growth, or HGH, more commonly known. Kung Lee, let this be known, as a friend to this program, and we believe he deserves his opportunity to defend himself. Before we go to Kung Lee, we talk with his manager, Gary Ibarra. Gary, how are you?
Good, good. Thanks for having me.
Let's talk a little bit about this human growth hormone. It's been a scourge, if you will, to the sport of mixed martial arts and to many sports, not just MMA. But Kung Lee, and you've known Kung for many, many years, has done everything seemingly the right way in life, in sports. He's a wrestler out of South Vietnam. Came to the United States and wrestled in the state of California. We've known him for many, many years. Did the announcement from the UFC catch you guys off guard? Did it surprise you?
Well, of course. Being Kung's manager, I'm privy to pretty much every aspect of his training and preparation. And, this has never been something remotely possible over the years that I've been representing him professionally. You would think that, being such a an older fighter, there the possibilities for some of these issues, like testosterone replacement therapy and things like that, which are normally prescribed to men of his age, would be an issue or a possibility, and even those have never been something that he would remotely entertain. Uh, he does not want to have an unfair advantage. He never did. If he can't, I mean, he was definitely one of those guys uh, that would say, if I can't do it on my own, then maybe I should retire. Uh, he's just not one of those guys. It's a respect thing. Martial arts is a life for him. It's the way he lives his life. To take any kind of substance that might give him an unfair advantage, to him, he feels would be disrespectful, not only to himself but to his opponent and also to martial arts in general. So yes, I mean, in a long-winded answer, we were very surprised.
So let's
To
set the stage. The fight takes place in Macau, and there is no standard or governing body, if you will, that regulates this. So the UFC takes it upon itself to hire a phlebotomist from the Mayo Clinic, flies that individual in. The blood is drawn after the fight on the 23rd and flown to the Hong Kong Functional Medical Testing Center. And so ordered by the UFC. They in turn, or they become their own regulating authority. Am I correct on that?
as far as those procedures go, I can't tell you that that's actually what happened, but that's what we were told. The blood was drawn. The person from the Mayo Clinic, the phlebotomist being from the Mayo Clinic, was not something that we knew. Um, Kong told me that it was an Asian person that did it. I don't know if there's a Mayo Clinic in China. Uh, as far as I know, there's only one. Um, but I don't know that for sure. Uh, so I have no idea where this person who drew the blood came from, but I do know that WADA requires that that person be certified.
Right.
Um, and as far as the how the sample was transferred to the Hong Kong Functional Medical Testing Center, I don't know if it was flown because it was in Hong Kong, which is not that far from Macau. Uh, so I don't know if it was flown or driven or whatever, or how it was transported, but that is something that we're supposed to know also, in terms of the chain of custody of the sample. Um, Strangely enough, that was the blood. That's what we were told was the process of transferring the blood to the testing facility. As far as his urine samples, the pre and post fight, those were sent to the United States for testing. Now, I don't know if they brought them back with them or if they were sent from China to the Quest lab in Kansas where the urine tests were performed. But it was done a week later. Both, actually, it's funny because both were done a week later after they were collected.
Wow.
The samples were collected on the 23rd, and both the urine tests in Kansas and the blood tests here or there in Hong Kong were done on the 29th or the 28th. Excuse me.
So the lab, to set this up, the lab is not a World Anti-Doping Agency accredited facility. So, in my estimation, strike one against them. They did not follow the standards for HGH testing. And WADA is considered the authority on drug testing for sports around the globe, not just mixed martial arts, not just boxing, but for sports around the globe. This is what has me scratching my head. Why did the UFC not follow the Nevada State Athletic Commission guidelines or approve limits? It seems to me that that the UFC would have done a better job of setting themselves up to win, because what they've done is they've hurt the reputation of a fighter who has stood up for this sport, for mixed martial arts, for wrestling at home and around the world, and has been doing so with great acclaim for years. Why would they have done this?
Uh, you're asking me to speculate on their reasoning in this situation, and I don't think I could do that because, I mean, over the years, I've been doing this for a long time. I've been dealing with the UFC for about 8 years now, and multiple occasions I can tell you where I had no idea what the thinking process was and some of the decisions that have been made. So, I mean, as far as speculating as to why they would do this, uh, that's all it would be speculation.
Okay.
It could be multiple things. It could be in a rush to report how tough they are on drugs, even they finding somebody who had, a quote unquote elevated level of testosterone or, excuse me, human growth hormone. Uh, they ran out and said, "Hey, look, we caught somebody." I don't know how important that is, uh, but in terms of the timing, I could see what the reasoning was. Is because recently TRT was the big, uh, you know, polarizing issue about TRT exemptions, things to that effect. That started to kind of wane a little bit because of the subject of human growth hormone taking the forefront due to the NFL instituting their human growth hormone testing program. Uh, Kung was announced to have an elevated level of human growth hormone only 4 days prior to that. Uh, so this was a very big story at the time.
Mm-hmm.
It could have been, the UFC was trying to piggyback off of that, to show that they're on an equivalent level with the NFL and Major League Baseball, and in terms of their stance on performance-enhancing drugs. I don't know, but I do know that you're correct in that had it had they just taken time to verify the results, to choose a laboratory that wasn't an occupational medicine or laboratory. If you want to find out what you're allergic to, or if you want to find out if your teenager is smoking pot, that's the lab to go to.
Okay.
Not if you want to find out if somebody's on human growth hormone. That lab was not equipped to do that type of testing. The lab had only been open since February.
Wow. And they did not have the reagent to that is
Nothing.
and that's probably my biggest concern, is that not only was it not WADA approved, but the rules, regulations, procedures that are standard were not followed, and then the blood, I understand, has either been lost or destroyed. Is that true?
That's what we were told. I think one of the other aspects that you forgot to mention was the time frame in which the sample was collected. The post-fight drawing of the blood is the worst possible time to get an accurate reading. The reason is because your pituitary gland that releases human growth hormone is what's called a pulsatory gland. It releases more and less throughout the day. But multiple studies have shown by very well accredited sports medicine journals that human growth hormone levels post exertion can be up to 500 times the normal level.
That's amazing.
And I think one of the real things that really kind of made it look bad in when we received Kung's results was the level that they considered to be normal. The problem is that the level that they considered to be normal is at a rested level, which is fasting for 12 hours prior to the test, waking up, going to the laboratory first thing in the morning, laying on the gurney, making sure that your heart rate is at a baseline level, and then drawing the blood. That's to get a baseline level of human growth hormone, not after somebody's just warmed up for an hour and then fought for 20 minutes.
Exactly. And water
So
regulations, by the way, require that samples like this are to be held frozen for 10
10
years.
years.
10
10
years,
years.
not a week.
Yeah, a week. A week is what we were told. A
I,
week. When we asked if the IGF-1 test had been performed on the sample, the UFC's attorney told us that he did not know. So we asked if they could perform that test, and he said we were told that he was going to contact the laboratory and find out if that was a possibility. Uh, I don't recall exactly how long after we were told. It was a day, or maybe been like, I think it was the following day. The UFC's general counsel got back in touch with me to tell me that the IGF-1 test had not been performed, and that it was also impossible to do at that point because the sample had been destroyed. That the lab has a standing procedure or policy that they only keep the samples for 1 week, which was disconcerting to say the least, knowing that that it has to be according to the water rules, frozen for up to 10 years. I mean, this is how Lance Armstrong was caught, basically, is because his samples were frozen, and several years down the road, when the testing became a lot more reliable in terms of the EPO, which is what he was caught for, they were able to catch him.
when the USC was challenged, initially they said, no, we will not. But now it seems like they are more accepting of an appeal, which may or may not erase the 12-month ban of Kung Lee fighting, which is really not the point, is it? It's not about whether or not he's banned for 12 months from fighting. It really goes down to reputation. Am I correct on that?
Well, that is probably the biggest aspect in terms of Kung Lee. When you have, I guess different fighters have different issues with Kung because he's at the end of his career as opposed to the beginning or the middle, and also because the fact that his future's in acting. It does have a much more. It's much more damning
You bet.
to him than it would be to somebody whose life is fighting. Um, it does carry a lot more weight in terms of reputation for somebody whose job is now to sell movie tickets, as opposed to tickets to watch him fight.
So how does the appeal process work? Can you describe how this works? Because it seems to me we're between August 23rd and today, being the 13th of October, there's quite a large window. Reputation being damaged, earnings ability being damaged. It seems like there's an awful lot at stake here, but it doesn't look like things are moving as quickly as they should.
Well, your question being what's the process? Your guess is as good as mine. We still haven't even been contacted by the UFC in regards to the appeal process or how it's going to be done or anything to that effect. The only reason I even knew that we were going to be allowed the opportunity to appeal is because Brett Okamoto from ESPN called me for a quote telling me that Dana White had just decided that he was going to allow us to appeal.
What
I never even knew about it.
So Dana has announced that they're going to allow an appeal. Who will be the arbitrator on this? If this is the first you're hearing about it, or when you were contacted by ESPN, is there obviously this has never happened before. There's never been an appeal or the allowance of an appeal because WADA is the standard. The standard wasn't followed. I would think an appeal would be natural, but this is the first time that anybody's been put to the test.
Well, and when you have a situation like this where the UFC is the uh, testing body, they're basically the athletic commission. Uh, these procedures are not in place because just well for that reason they're not an athletic commission. They're not equipped logistically to handle these types of things. They're not equipped logistically to handle testing though either. Uh, so I think the whole procedure in terms of the appeal, I think the UFC was put on the spot and they had to make an answer.
Mm-hmm.
They had to come up with an answer, and that was it.
So, and as much as I'm not throwing the UFC under the bus, I don't want it to seem like I am. What I'm trying to do with you today, is throw some light on the process. Dr. Don Catlin, who's a well-known anti-doping scientist, and I'm going to quote him. He said, "I think the test done by the UFC is useless. I wouldn't pay any attention to it at all." That's not the answer to the problem. The problem is whether or not we can reconstruct the reputation of somebody who's been well known to do things the right way in the business. And this is a business. It's a tricky business indeed. But at the end of the day, it has to be somebody that can be trusted. So do you have a say? Is there who sets the arbitrator? Is the Nevada State Athletic Commission get involved? And I would imagine if they haven't contacted you, it's purely speculation and for you to suppose. What more can you tell us?
Well, I can only tell you what pretty much everybody else knows, uh, which is based on the statement made by Dana White and by the UFC's chief operating officer, Ike Epstein. Apparently, we'll be offered the opportunity to appeal to the American Association of Arbitrators. We have some type of a time frame that we're not aware of that we have to appeal by, and we'll get the opportunity to sit in front of the arbitrators and make our case. The venue was not something that was stated in his comments, whether it would be in Nevada or somewhere else. We have very little information at this point. The UFC has invited me to come to their office on Wednesday, so I will be attending a meeting there. I'm hoping that this is what the topic will be. The particulars of how we're going to arbitrate, the venue, the procedures, timeframes, things like that. Because also, you have to remember that there is nothing in these contracts that these athletes have that require them to submit to an arbitration. So contractually, we don't even have to do that. But obviously, in this case, because it's an appeal that we'd like to make sure rescinds his suspension, we will. A lot of these things are basically being done for the first time.
First time, and that you're
Yeah.
setting it's almost we're setting a standard, but it's at the expense of Kung, and that's obviously a big problem. And maybe, perhaps, they're inviting you to the office to thank you for all the time that Kung Lee spent in China for 2.5 months or more, helping to build the reputation of the UFC, to help marshal the forces there, to put a face to the UFC in Asia as they struggle to build develop their footprint. But maybe that's why they're inviting you to the office.
Sure.
And
I guess you're right. I mean, it could be it, but
he gave up an awful lot to be there on behalf of the UFC and on behalf of
and
mixed
that
martial arts.
and that 2.5 months was only one time. He's been out there quite a lot. I mean, right before his fight with Rich Franklin, he actually had to forego elbow surgery in order to go on a media tour right in the middle of his camp on to push the fight with Rich Franklin. Now, granted, Rich Franklin was with him as well, so it wasn't like Rich got some type of a extended time frame to train, that Kung was not allotted or anything like that. They were both on the tour together. But Kung's was more demanding, is absolutely because of the fact that he's Asian. They obviously never would have went to Vietnam as part of the tour, which he did, and because he speaks Vietnamese fluently, it was he's a great ambassador for them there, basically all around Asia, a lot of because of his movies. But I mean, he had to forego surgery. He fought Rich Franklin hurt. Um, he took, I think it was something like a month out of his training camp to go to Asia to promote the fight. And this was only one instance. I mean, he has been in and out of Asia, all around the Pacific Rim on behalf of the UFC for several years now. I mean, even Dana White himself said it, in his statement to ESPN about how he's appreciates everything that Kung has done on their behalf to help push the sport of mixed martial arts in Asia, which does surprise me a bit that they would be so quick to call him out on something that was not even 100% proven yet.
I want to quote you, if I can. No steroids, no stimulants, no masking agents, and his testosterone was at a completely normal level. The only test that Kung didn't pass, apparently, and for a 42-year-old man, I got to tell you, in my eyes, he passed the eye test. But to some, his vascularity, the way he looked, perhaps raised some eyes. Will the UFC, in your estimation, allow itself to be examined this closely in its decision to put this in front of an arbitrator?
Again, asking me to speculate on the ideas that the UFC or what they're thinking, it's very difficult because there have been multiple decisions that they've made, not counting this one with Kung, over the years that I've questioned. So I couldn't tell you that how they're going to proceed. I would definitely not want somebody poking around. But it may be a situation that they are going to be unable to avoid because in an arbitration, it's almost like a legal proceeding. We're in a situation where we can subpoena records, we can subpoena people. It's 90% of a regular courtroom situation. So everything is going to be up for grabs in terms of the information. And do I know for a fact that the UFC would like everything that we're going to have access to get out? Probably not. I mean, a lot of that stuff is private, business information that they would not want to have disseminated to the public or to their competitors. But who knows? I mean, I do think that there are quite a few things that I am curious about that we will get the opportunity to see, including, I'd really like to see Michael Bisping's blood test results.
I would too. Let me ask you this: if this meeting on Wednesday were to go like this, thanks for coming in. Listen, we're just going to drop this whole thing. Is that a possibility?
Well, it's their suspension. So yes, absolutely. I mean, Kung is not suspended by an athletic commission or by any governing body. This suspension is purely by the UFC. If Kung did not have a contract with the UFC and wanted to go fight somewhere else, he could fight right now. He has no suspension that he's currently living under. The only suspension that he currently has is the one that the UFC has levied against him. And they are not a governing body, so they're not in a situation where they could stop it from fighting anywhere else. Other than contractually.
Right, not a governing body. And as far as Kung's professional fighting career, it's been noted and stated that he has retired, or is that true?
There has been no official retirement statement issued by him. That's something that he and his wife are discussing. Obviously, his age is a factor. The injuries that he sustained in this last fight are going to have some bearing. But he has not made any kind of concrete decision as to whether or not he will continue. Um, it also kind of depends on his acting career. Um, to be honest, which has, the fact that he is a high level fighter and he has been for such a long period of time has resulted in him getting a lot of opportunities as an actor. Um, if he was to stop fighting, I'm sure he's probably contemplating whether or not that will have any kind of effect on him getting future roles. Uh, but I think the thing he's more worried about now is will this with these test results and the negative backlash that's kind of come from um, the public, will that have any kind of negative bearing on his ability to get movie roles and going forward? Because he has put all his eggs in that basket at this point. Um, you know, but it's actually worked out for him. He's actually one of he actually can act. I mean, it's not
Yes, he
something
can.
that it's actually something that he's become very good at. I mean, he takes on the challenge of becoming a great actor just the exact same way that he's taken on becoming a great martial artist. And we all see how good he's done
He
at becoming a
trained
martial artist.
Channing Tatum, did he not, for the big
Yes.
U.S. release of the movie
Mhm.
Foxcatcher?
Yeah, actually, Channing Tatum was at his fight in Macau. He actually flew all the way to Macau to be with Kong for the fight.
Let me ask you this, and I've talked to Kung, but I'm going to ask you as his manager and friend. Gary, has Kung been um, personally hurt? And this is something that comes from inside,
Mhm.
knowing how he lives, knowing how he trains and does business. Has he been hurt by this emotionally?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, initially finding out the results, I mean, he was pretty uh, distraught over the possibility that immediately you start to think, okay, did I take something? Is there a possibility that this is true that I just don't know about? Immediately, I would say fear kind of gripped him, as to whether it's true or not, because he prides himself on being, a straight up guy. Uh, and so that right off the bat kind of really started put him in a bad way. I guess I would say emotionally in regards to this whole situation. But then as I started to do the homework about the testing and the procedures, and then finding all of these things out about the lab and the time frame in which the sample was collected, all of these things that we've kind of put out there. Um, he did become more angry, and a lot of it stemmed from the initial week before this all came out, where people were, uh, you know, calling him a cheater. Every website was condemning him and saying that his reputation was tarnished forever, and that why couldn't he just, go out and stop fighting at 42 years old? Why did he have to use HGH to continue to fight? Um, those things started to bother him quite a bit, because I mean there was an overwhelming wave of them. People putting him in the same category with some people who have been caught red-handed. But I think the thing that really kind of uh, just really hit home with him was the people making comments and and slamming him basically to his son on social media. Instagram, Twitter. I mean, his son he's 12 or 13 years old. Uh, he's in a situation where he's on Twitter and, with his friends, and people are finding him and saying, "Oh, your dad is a cheater. How does it feel to know that your dad is a cheat? How does it feel to know that your dad is, and then, it even resulted in death threats,
Death
which really
threats.
surprised, yes, which really surprised me, but because I didn't think this was that big of a deal. But it does not surprise me when you have somebody who is held up to be a shining example
Right.
of what a martial artist is, and then to have the idea that they've fallen. It's like, I understand that people have an emotional reaction because they put so much stock into a person because of their resolve. to find out that they're dirty. And it makes, I mean, I completely understand as a fan of the sport, as a fan, and period. I mean, I can see, but I mean, it does. I don't think it ever justifies a death threat, but um, it didn't stop people from doing it. So
It's sad when and fans, that is that part of that word, fanatical,
yeah,
and when fans are involved, it's amazing things they will say or do, and the proof really is. I think it's up to the UFC now to make the right decision, and I'll be interested to know what your meeting is like on Wednesday with Dana and the people at the UFC, the staff at the UFC. My hope is that they will, admit that there's a possibility of being wrong here, and they will rescind anything that they have, put in place with regard to Kung, whether he's guilty or innocent. I think that's now up to the arbitrator if, in fact, they let it go that far. I think my opinion out there is very well known, and I knew yours as well, Gary. But gosh, testing procedures need to be the same across the board, and what is it? We've got to hold ourselves up to a current and consistent standard, and I don't think it was done in this case at all. I think there's so many red flags here. It's amazing you can see the light of day at all. But I'll be interested, Gary, to hear what comes of this meeting on Wednesday, and if it needs to go any further. I appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today. The wrestling community obviously very, very concerned, very interested in Kung and his future, but more than anything, his reputation has been called into play here, and we know him to be somebody other than who he's being portrayed to be. Again, thanks for the time, Gary.
no problem. Thank you for having me, Scott.
Bet. I'm Scott Casper for Takedown Media. That's Gary Ibarra from, he's the manager for Kung Lee, and a pretty darn good one at that. We appreciate him taking the time, 30 minutes. That's it.